And we are live.
We are live.
All right, very good. Good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Energility Connecting the Dots. Today's webinar is going to focus on Energy Star. I'm sure you've all seen the name, but might not be quite clear on exactly what it means. Is it about a building? Is it about a dishwasher? Or both? So Justin here is going to help take us through the building perspective on that. My name is Richard Alexu. I'm the Manager of Strategy and Business Development here at Energility. Before I turn it over, just a couple of quick tidbits for you. The session will be recorded and microphones are muted, but if you'd like a copy of the slides, just shoot me an email at richard@energility.com or put your information in the chat box and we'll get a copy out to you afterwards. As long as I'm mentioning the chat box, if you would take a moment and please share a word or two on what you might be interested in getting out of today, and we'll make sure that we key on that for you. We're going to start the discussion with a presentation on Energy Star, and there'll be time afterwards to address your questions. And again, please just use the chat box to funnel us the questions. I'll be looking throughout the presentation. If there's anything that comes up during, we'll try and address it right away as it comes up. As always, we can be found at right here on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and search for Energility, and you'll see us, our videos, and our webinar series for you and or anyone else who's interested in coming back to take a look at them. Not seeing any comments just yet, but with that, let me introduce Justin Kale, the Director of Opportunity Development here at Energility, and take it away with Energy Star. Let's go.
Awesome. Let's talk about Energy Star and not my great hair today. So appreciate everybody's time. We're going to get right into the Energy Star conversation. And jump right in here. So as we talk about it, one of the things we talk about is benchmarking, and the decades of experience that we have kind of are focused on building plans, and any good plan starts with a starting line, starting point, a benchmark of where to navigate from. And so Energy Star provides a nice tool for that. You've probably seen this little light blue square indicator on, like Rich said, appliances, everything from your computer to, more sophisticated commercial kitchen equipment. And it also can be applied to buildings. And it's really tying the energy consumption of buildings to environmental performance, and where are you getting your energy from, and how does that energy efficiency of the building correlate to an improved environmental performance. So it's a lot of discussion around sustainability, is that connection of the dots between energy and the environment. So the program is administered by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and it's been around for decades now. And the focus is obtaining a certification or providing a barometer for measuring performance in buildings. Now, we'll talk about some of the metrics here in just a minute, but one of the primary objectives is to be able to benchmark against peer buildings. So you obviously wouldn't want to compare a house of worship to a manufacturing plant, or a building that's dealing with cold climates in Minnesota versus a building in Miami that's dealing with heat and the different climates. So this is a way to be able to normalize for some of those different metrics and be able to compare. And the first place we start is the website, energystar.gov/buildings. Takes you to this screen. You'll notice a couple of different things here that are very helpful for folks managing buildings, folks providing building solutions, and getting a queue here. Maybe need to share the back up here for just a second. And go back here to, there we go. I think we're good. So
Good.
Again, the focus on energy efficiency and that benchmark or starting point is found here at energystar.gov. There's a login, but on the left-hand side you'll see a couple different subcategories here. Understanding the metrics. The website really does go to great lengths to give you resources to understand. Even some trainings, and they have a monthly open office hours, Energy Star 101, 102, Portfolio Manager 101, 102 that get the kind of question and answer session, and those are cataloged here. There's different resources depending on whether you're managing a manufacturing plant or a house of worship. But this is the starting point to get into the Portfolio Manager and start benchmarking a building. We're not going to go through all of the intricate details to set up an account and set up a building and attach meters and all of the details that go into that. But we want to give you a starting point for understanding what's going on in the Energy Star tool, and even share a few things here in a minute about some changes forthcoming. So what's one of the reasons you would want to benchmark? Well, I mean, we get this question all the time, like, where do I start? But then not only where do I start, where do I go from here? And, is this going to cost me an arm and a leg to be able to get there? Well, again, having that benchmark or that starting point allows you, with a few basic building characteristics and some real energy data from your last 12 to 24 months, you can get a comparison, one, of where you fit in your industry, how you compare to other types of buildings of similar size, similar climate zone, and similar characteristic. But then also, when you get that score from 1 to 100, this kind of really gives you a gauge of, if you're on the lower half, as they always say, lots of opportunity for improvement. But then, if you're on the upper half, there's some room for improvement, but there's also room for recognition. So really, this graphic kind of simplifies it to say, hey, if you're in the 25 to 49 category, with a few simple operational items and some capital improvement, you can make some headway in performing better compared to other buildings like yours. If you're up here in the 75 category, you're actually doing pretty good, and most of your effort should be focused on low cost things and sustaining what you're already doing. And conversely, if you're in the bottom quarter, you're going to want to probably budget for some higher capital investments before you get into seeing some gains. One of the nice benefits of Energy Star is the certification capability, so that 1 to 100 score is an easy metric. If somebody says, hey, I'm a 50, well, we know where you're right there in the middle. And if you're on that top quarter, that 75 or greater, you can actually be recognized as an Energy Star rated building. And that doesn't necessarily mean Energy Star is endorsing your building, but it simply means your building, the way you operate it, the way you're using energy, and with a combination of how it was constructed, it's one of the top 25% of buildings in its class across the region, and compared to hundreds of thousands of buildings across the country. And the certification process, one of the reasons we highlight that is, folks, especially in the commercial real estate industry and different building markets, are looking for ways to differentiate themselves. The office market, being what it is now, where there's different policies that business owners are deploying, whether it's coming back to work or whether it's trying to attract new leases for growing vacancy in buildings. They're trying to look for that differentiator and saying, hey, we have a good sustainable building. It's a healthy building. It's got good indoor air quality. All of those things that go and are positive connotations with a building. And this Energy Star certification is kind of one way to, instead of giving a whole big, word salad, a big buffet of all of the things that are going on in the building, how do you just simply say, hey, my building is one of the top performers? And, a nonprofit organization, a house of worship may look at it as, hey, I can go to my parishioners or my folks that donate and say, hey, I'm using this building and I'm being good stewards of the operating costs because I have a high performance. So that's a couple of reasons why you would want to get certification. And it's really quite simple in process. As long as you get a licensed professional that understands your building, and they can get that from doing a walkthrough, reviewing building plans, understanding how the equipment's operating. There's a verification process that has to be completed, and then they sign off on the application that goes to Energy Star. And within a couple of weeks, they review that application and provide a go no go on the application. And in our experience doing this work for over a decade now, with certifying buildings, our lead engineer Craig's been certifying them beyond our company's existence. Typically, they don't deny it. It's more of they may ask for more information. So they may say, hey, let me see an audit of all the data that you collected, or, let me get some additional information about why. For example, we had a client recently that achieved the magic 100 score, and we had to provide some defining criteria about why is that building 100. And so we had to provide more detail than what they were asking on the standard application. Again, put you at the top of the class. You're in the top 25% in energy performance, and as we know, lower energy use, is really about having lower energy costs. And while you can't control the rate necessarily in your building or maybe in your region, but you can control how you use that energy and drive costs down where possible. And the other key point is this is not a certification based on conceptual criteria, let's call it, from other organizations like LEED. For example, there's a new construction pathway that we're not going to unpack all the details, but simply put, it's about energy and environmental design. And so it's focused on those design criteria. And in Energy Star's case, it's talking about building characteristics, but it's actually using your real building performance from the last 12 months to assess that score. So it is using your actual data. So that's one of the reasons we lean on this certification as a recommendation for clients, to be able to say, hey, this is a way for you to actually demonstrate real performance, and it's real dollars saved in your bottom line, not necessarily concept. Again, the certifications doesn't require anything from Energy Star's perspective. Your cost of obtaining that certification is kind of, we showed those money bags in the earlier slide. How many of those do you have to stack up to be able to make improvements to the building? Again, using your real energy data and your building characteristics, where do you fit on that 1 to 100 scale? So you may have to provide some, capital cost or some investment, and then wait a period of time to see the results of that. So those costs, could be thought of as being required for certification. And then you obviously have to pay for the licensed professional. And so it does become a cost-effective certification if you're already making the investments in the building, and that's already part of your plans. But the program itself is not does not charge you a fee. There is, and I'll call myself a liar here. The standard Energy Star pathway to certification is with an existing building, and that's been done for quite a long time. The program actually does have a track for newly designed building called Energy Star Design Intent. And again, those few building characteristics that we talked about, things like occupancy, things like space conditioned, how much is heated or cooled, how many people do you have in it, things that would actually drive energy use in your building. Some of those characteristics, along with an energy model and whatever the output of the energy model is, can be used in the tool to be able to establish a design intent. So, for example, Rich goes to build a new building and I'm his design professional. I do an energy model. We can put that electric and gas or all electric building. We can put all that energy data from the energy model into the Energy Star tool. And, let's say he's building a 50,000 square foot office building. How many people is it going to have? What's the occupancy? How many computers? Is it all going to be heated and cooled? All those characteristics, we put that into the tool just like we would for an existing building. And there's a design intent, and it's that same 1 to 100 score can be used, and then a registered architect or engineer signs off on that design criteria being used, and that's an established certification that can be used for being able to articulate the effectiveness of the design. So we touched on this just a minute ago. One of the reasons we recommend Energy Star, because it's one, cost effective, and we deal with a lot of small business and nonprofit clients, several of which have been certified as Energy Star. We've actually certified at last check here a couple months ago, we've certified the only houses of worship in the state of Ohio that have achieved the Energy Star certification. So there's some of those that say, hey, we want to get recognized multiple times. And we've had other organizations, not only houses of worship, but even some office buildings. And they're like, this is the same thing I'm doing year over year, day after day. And I'll keep tracking and making sure my building doesn't drift in terms of energy use. But they'll get that certification one time. And it does have a designation per year. And so you do have to get recertified annually. But sometimes folks will say, hey, I just want to get that recognition. And for my internal records, we're going to keep doing the same things that we always do, and continue to look for new ways to save and new ways to reduce and keep an eye on our building's operation. But it is cost effective to get this certification. And again, it's based on actual performance, not concepts. And then, buildings and organizations of any size, capability, probably the smallest one we've certified has been about a 15,000 square foot house of worship. And we have one client currently that's been recognized multiple times, and it's part of their stewardship and their environmental goals is to maintain that certification. There is some capability on Energy Star's site to search. And we showed you that website login a couple of slides early in the presentation. There is a place that you can actually go and look for professional licensed professionals that are registered with Energy Star, having done certifications before. And they do have a place where if maybe there's a retired PE or an organization that's doing some philanthropic work, they may offer that certification at no cost. And we've done that for a couple of our clients as well. So again, it doesn't have to be costly. And, again, it's the actual data that you're already generating from your energy bills anyway. So now, kind of as we've been pontificating about the Energy Star program, take a pause for a second to think about the fact that, when we do a lot of the energy plan and building studies, we're focused on the energy savings, but there's so many more things than that one metric. And one of those is building certification. So a lot of times the results of an energy audit can yield projects that have to be done. And in some cases, it's a client targeting, how do I get that certification? I just did this study or I've been doing the planning, and now I've made these big investments in my building, or we've decided to increase the maintenance budget so that we're doing some best practices or better practices. How do I show somebody this stuff's paying off? And a building certification is one of the ways that can be done. Just kind of as we wind down here, I want to share a few items. Again, the program's been around. I had the privilege of working with a real estate company that helped with some of the groundwork that was laid with Energy Star to help understand what was going on in buildings. And so the program's been around since the mid to late 90s, and it was very, very rudimentary years and years ago. And they've made some big updates in, I think it was 2012 and 2018. They made some significant updates. And actually with some Inflation Reduction Act funding, the EPA has started making some additional updates. We've listed several of those here. I'm not going to read them all to you, but just a couple of highlights. That new construction or design intent, they've actually bumped the scoring criteria up to a minimum score of 80, kind of trying to push the construction industry to raise the bar a little bit. And then in some municipalities in central Ohio here, we have Columbus, and there's dozens of those around this country that have building performance standards. And in Columbus, we have a required benchmarking ordinance. And so some of the future updates, and I will tell you, some of these are published as happened, and some are forthcoming. And so this is one where you'll be able to track performance in municipalities where there's a building performance standard. So again, some things forthcoming. It's continuing to be updated and modernized, so that makes it a little bit more engaging and easier to use. That certainly helps get people to adopt and use this as a tool. Again, it's free, it's online, and we have the expertise to help guide and direct, and we use it all the time. Probably the three biggest takeaways from this, if you haven't gathered the things that we've been repeating, is it's a starting point for action, taking with a benchmark. It's easy correlation to say, where's my building fit on that 1 to 100 scale, and it's also a very affordable certification. So appreciate everybody dialing in for a short chat here on benchmarking and Energy Star. Want to see if we had any questions come across.
Not seeing any questions online, but Justin, you'd mentioned that there are differences in buildings, right? A library, house of worship, manufacturing plant. How are those differences accounted for by Energy Star?
Yeah, good question. One of the common factors is equipment and people drive energy use, because buildings can be designed and equipment installed, but it also has to be operated, whether it's manual or whether it's with control. You put a lot of people in a space versus only a few people in a space, the heating and cooling reactions. The differentiator is, I'll give you an example, like a house of worship. One of the defining characteristics, and I would say pretty much every building class, and there's a couple dozen in there, all the way down to barracks and military bases, and municipal buildings and bank buildings and different types of office buildings. The handful of criteria that are in there, almost everyone is going to ask for, what's your population in typical occupied times? How much of the building is heated and cooled? Again, factors that would impact virtually any building. Like a house of worship, for example, the square footage of the sanctuary or worship space is a criteria. And this was just a statistic that was updated here within the last 5-6 years, is square feet of food preparation space. So when you think about houses of worship, you may have an older facility that might have large commercial kitchen equipment, standing pilot lights, big giant refrigerators. You may also have a small, almost looks like your home, or maybe your home kitchen's bigger than that, a residential stove, residential refrigerator. So what they've defined is that square footage of cooking or food preparation space is a defining characteristic. So there also are some categories that are statistically significant to, like an office building. When I was doing work in real estate in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was not uncommon still to have some CRT, big, huge computer monitors. So computers is a statistical count on a lot of the building types, but some of them, it doesn't actually impact the Energy Star score. So if you put 0 in or you put 100 in, it's not going to define the score. But there are some quote unquote optional statistics in there. And again, it's, the tool is great for giving you that Energy Star score. It can also be your online platform to keep track of some of those changes year over year when you add additional square footage or you change building characteristics. I guess the last comment on that is when the pandemic kicked off, one of the things that Energy Star did was started providing some revised criteria. So when buildings were getting certified in 21, 22, 23, they were looking at that last 12 months of history. And so there was some scrutiny on, hey, what was your population during that time period? And if it declined, you put that in there and you put the date that it declined. And then, hey, we've had people back in the building, and you put that date. And so it's tracking that and correlating that again to energy use so that the score is sustained based on those characteristics. So that can also be helpful as a facilities person to go back and look and say, hey, I don't remember when that was, but I've got it at my Energy Star profile.
Yeah, that's interesting. You think about a 20-year-old CRT where there might be a bullpen set up with a number of those in operation, and how much more energy those could pull than, say, dozens of notebooks or tablets that aren't even plugged in all the time.
Sure.
So I'm sure they'll have to make adjustments as we continue to evolve and technology improves. Does geography come into play in scores?
Yeah, it does actually. Kind of 2 points along that line of geography. One is it does look at your climate zone, because it's correlating your energy use and where you're getting your energy from. So for example, you're in Central Ohio, maybe getting stuff from AEP or from the municipal electric, but it's looking at where are you getting it on the grid and what's the environmental impact of what they call the source energy. And so in a sense, geography comes into play because it's looking at where you're connected to the grid. The other thing is, and I don't know, go back a slide or two here. Some of these current and future changes, one of the things that's a little bit of a behind the curtain, and I think it's more of the modernization, is the typical meteorological year weather. And we use that a lot, obviously, in energy auditing, but it's also reflected in the algorithm that goes into predicting the Energy Star score and calculating it. It's looking at 30-year weather patterns, a typical meteorological year. And in the future, they're actually going to move to shorten that down to 15. And also, there's lots more data in the last 30 years that's available because there's more access points to the internet, expanded telecom networks, et cetera. And so they're actually going to be pulling from more weather data stations as well. So I want to say it's either double or triple, maybe even more than that, but it's a significant increase in the number of weather stations that will be available, and they're shrinking that window. Instead of looking at the 30-year horizon, looking at the last 15 years. So it's taking a much more representative snapshot, still looking at statistics, not just, hey, how did you perform last year, but it's looking at normalizing those statistically over a horizon, but it's shrinking that down to that which we've seen change here in the last decade or two.
Very good.
Yeah, good point.
All right. Two identical buildings right next to each other. Same size, same occupancy, same, for argument's sake, same equipment inside and out. But one of them generates 50% of its electricity from a rooftop solar array. They're going to get the same score?
So good question. So all the statistics being equal, they would probably, and it would get into the economy of scale, right? Because if it's think about a narrow footprint of a building that has some solar energy being generated versus a big wide warehouse or manufacturing plant, the Energy Star score is likely to be higher at the one where they're getting on-site solar because they're pulling less off of the grid, and the algorithm for Energy Star is calculating a score based on your source energy. And it is important how you use energy, but point being, if the buildings are both using the same amount of energy, the score is going to be very similar, because with solar you're not reducing your energy consumption, you're just getting it from a different source, right? Yeah. And so that brings up the point of the way the Energy Star score is built is it's basically looking at those statistics and saying, hey, based on number of occupants, 100% air conditioning, number of computers, food prep space, where sanctuary square footage, all those algorithms and those ingredients baked into the recipe, it's saying, hey, here's what your score should be. And then it's saying, okay, you used a certain amount of electric and gas, and that correlates to a certain amount of energy, and then it adjusts the score. So it's the interesting thing about that is if you go into Energy Star, you can actually dig down in and find the half dozen 10-page description of the algorithm from all of the data points. So if you happen to be a very technical engineer type, want to dig into the details, they actually are very transparent about showing you how the score is calculated. It's most of the time, folks don't want to go below where do I fit? Am I 70? Again, we have several clients that are like, hey, are we ready to certify for Energy Star? Am I 75 still? That's all the farther they get into it.
Got it. So as you mentioned earlier, I would encourage all you folks to there's a lot of information out there on the EPA website for Energy Star. Go and take a look. I went myself earlier today just to give you an idea of how effective the program's been. In 2020 alone, there were 520 billion kilowatt hours that were saved, translating to about 42 billion in energy costs saved by the program, and a reduction in emissions of 400 million metric tons. So there's significant impact here from the program. And then if you look all the way back to 1992, it has saved 5 trillion kilowatt hours, more than 500 billion in energy costs, and 4 billion metric tons of emissions. So it's real, folks, and encourage you to play and call us if you have any questions and want to figure out how to get started. But thank you for joining us today. Again, if you'd like copies of the slides, send an email to me, richard@energility.com. Even if you don't want slides, we'd like to hear from you and what other topics you might want to hear going forward, richard@energility.com or justin@energility.com. But with that, we will be back next month on Thursday, November 21st to talk about CPACE, or Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy, as a finance option for your efficiency and building programs. So thank you very much, and
Awesome.
have a great day, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
All right.